Well, we're going to do a walk round of my BSA today, and just done some work on it, mostly wiring mods, and there she is. She's a golden flash, which is written on the tank. The rivet counters won't like this bike because it's a combination of two styles. I suspect that many years ago this bike was in a crash and it was rebuilt as cheaply as possible using whatever bits came to hand, which of course is what you did back in the 50s and 60s. In actual fact, the parts that this one's been rebuilt with are the ones that I like the best. They changed the style in 1958, and this has got elements of both the styles. The tank, for example, is an early one with an early badge which says Golden Flash on it. Forks are original. It's got what they call a diver's helmet style headlamp because the nacelle looks a little bit like a diver's helmet. The later ones have got a straight nacelle. The advantage of this one is it's got a proper headlamp which is really easy to adjust. And as you can see, hopefully in the sun, it's got an LED front headlamp which is really quite amazing compared to the original. And as with all my bikes, the rear light has been changed for an LED, which as you can see is really bright. So this one has the later mud guards on. I think the oil tank is from a later bike. There is signs of scoring on the frame, so I know that it's been probably thrown down the road at some point. There's also signs that it had a chair on it. Well, anyone that was a kid in the 50s would have seen these hauling very large sidecars with the whole family aboard, and they were very popular for that reason. And if you wanted a sportier model, you went for a rocket or a super rocket which had an aluminium head. Now this one's got all iron, as you can see, an iron head, smaller valves, and it's tuned for torque. They're only good for about 34 horsepower, which doesn't seem very much, but when you're actually riding it, it is very torquey. You very rarely need to drop down the gears to go up a hill. It's had quite a bit of work on it over the last winter. It was plus 60 the barrels, so they've been re-sleeved. The head's been refurbished with new valve guides, and obviously the valves ground in. Forks have had new bushes, and there's been general changes to it. The indicators have been on there for yonks because I use this bike to go on a couple of trips to Europe, and if you look on the front mudguard you'll see signs of one of them. Real Classic in Picardy, September 09. Well, that's a magazine, Real Classic, and all the keen readers sort of got together, and a dozen of us or so pushed off to Picardy and on down to France to the Somme in 09. And I've been a couple more trips on this one. It's never caused any trouble. We were restricted to about 45 miles per hour because one of the chaps had a BSA C12, which is a 250 that cruises at about 45, so we all stuck to a very low figure, and I was getting 80 to a gallon at a steady 45. As you can hear, it's ticking over nicely, not very much rattling. It's got a 12 volt alternator where the old Lucas E3L 6 volt dynamo used to live, and that's belt driven. Everything else is pretty much standard. It's got a Triumph 4-plate clutch, which is a mod that people used to do back in those days because the 6-spring clutch on the BSA was tricky to adjust. The 4-plate one was a really good one. Other than that, it's had stainless steel rims and stainless spokes, which was quite an expensive do, but when I came back from the ferry on the ferry last time, the salt water got into the chrome on the rims, which were Italian, and they rusted out in no time. So one of the things that we did was change the wheels and the spokes for stainless steel. There's a fair bit of stainless on it here and there. You'll find spacers that have been turned out. It's got Hagen shocks. The original ones, well, they were completely worn out. Hagen's are very good. The forks on BSAs and the frame from this era were really good. I had a Tiger 110 Triumph, which today goes for £2,000 or £3,000 more than this, but believe me, the Tiger 110 frame from the 50s, which was single down tube, and the front forks don't come into the same category as a BSA. The only other one that frame that obviously would be possibly better would be a Norton. But some people prefer the BSA frame to the Norton. I do, actually, because it's very slim on the seat. The wide line featherbed frame on the Norton is very difficult for short-legged folk like me because it grabs your thighs. One thing I did do during the lockdown was make some baffles for the silencers, because replacement silencers don't tend to be baffled these days. They put deflectors in. So I manufactured some baffles, and you can see that there's some brass ends on the tailpipe, which I rather like that, so I left them there. They were some old 1.5-inch plumbing fittings I had, which were just the right size to slip into the tailpipe, and then the baffle attaches to that, and on the other side of the tailpipe there's a grub screw to keep the whole thing intact. So far so good, because it sounds pretty much like they used to. They were never noisy. These days classic bikes tend to be too noisy because they just don't baffle the silencers. The original Burgess silencers were well baffled. So I'll walk round and then give her a blip on the throttle. Oh, one thing to note, that there's a pannier frame on it. I've got a pair of Craven panniers that came off a Norton Interstate, a police bike, that I put on for touring, and I made the frames for that. And it's got the original Craven top box on it from the 60s. It's a little bit tatty, but I don't mind that. It's, 60 years old now, so it's allowed to be a bit tatty. So we'll give her a bit of a rev. And as you can hear, it really does sound nice. Yep, not too throaty. As I say, before the baffles went in, it was just too noisy for what it was. I mean, these are just plodders, and it was never meant to be a Rocket Gold Star. One other thing some people will notice is that it's got a late 60s twin leading shoe front brake added as an extra. Works very well. The only snag is that the brake linings have to be thinned down to get into the A10 hub. So although it's better than the original, it still isn't as good as, say, on a 69 Bonneville or Thunderbolt or something like that. But she's the most comfortable bike to ride that you could imagine. Similar to my Tiger 110. You could ride these things for hours, and this one just fits like a glove. We did several hours on the trot touring on these, across Belgium. This one's been into Germany through Luxembourg. So there she is. Nice bike with a sensible chain guard, you'll note. Okay, I think we'll stop it there. Oh, there are indicators, and I fitted LEDs on each side just because I had them. I fitted those indicators because of the touring, and basically I think I feel a bit safer when I've got proper indication. Okay, next thing we'll do is a trip out on it, because she is running in. Can't go much above 45, not for a few hundred miles anyway. So time to put her back in the garage.